Weeks passed, and though the leaves of Pinebrook had long since fallen, the story of the two little girls and their heroic dog continued to ripple across the town, and far beyond. News crews came and went. Letters poured in from across the country. Some wrote to commend the bravery of Emma and Ellie, others to thank the department for restoring trust after a betrayal that could have destroyed it. But for those at the heart of the story, it was never about headlines. It was about healing. Luke Donovan returned to duty after 6 weeks of recovery. His first day back wasn't marked by any ceremony or speech, just a quiet walk into the precinct, Coda trotting faithfully by his side, and a standing ovation from every officer in the room. Some clapped, some cried. No one spoke because no words were needed. He had come back not just from injury, but from the brink of something darker. And now he stood stronger. Sarah Miles was promoted to deputy chief shortly after the investigation closed. Her relentless pursuit of justice in the Brent Callahan case earned her the respect of officers and citizens alike. But she kept the silver pin the girls gave her during the ceremony, a tiny badge made of cardboard and glitter, in the top drawer of her desk. She said it reminded her what the job was really about. Brent was indicted on multiple charges, including obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The evidence was overwhelming, and his silence in court was deafening. He offered no defense, no statement, only a slight twitch in his jaw when the verdict was read, guilty on all counts. And yet, amid the fallout, it was the quiet moments that stayed in people's hearts. Emma and Ellie returning to the forest trail with their parents and Daisy, pointing out where they had first seen Coda. Coda, retired again from active duty, now spending his days in Luke's backyard chasing butterflies and barking at squirrels, and Luke himself, visiting schools, telling kids about what it means to be brave, not because you're not afraid, but because you act in spite of it. On one such visit, a boy asked, "Were you scared when you were bleeding in the woods?" Luke smiled, knelt down, and replied, "I was terrified, but then 2 angels showed up, and they didn't run." That was the heart of the story. 2 6-year-olds and a dog faced something bigger than themselves. They didn't panic, they didn't freeze, they listened to their instincts and they acted. And because of that, a man lived, a department was saved, and a town found its courage again. Sometimes heroes don't wear badges or uniforms. Sometimes they wear pigtails and pink sneakers. And sometimes they have 4 legs and a bark that refuses to be ignored. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If it moved you, inspired you, or gave you hope, we invite you to support our channel. Please like this video, subscribe for more true and powerful stories, and tap the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. We have so many more stories to share about resilience, justice, and the quiet power of everyday people. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate the heart of a child or the loyalty of a dog. The weight of Brent Callahan's betrayal hit the Pinebrook Police Department like a slow-moving earthquake. It wasn't just the crime, it was how deep the deception had run. For nearly a decade, Brent had operated from within, manipulating reports, steering investigations away from old associates, and making sure just enough truth got out to satisfy any surface-level scrutiny. It was the perfect cover, until Luke Donovan decided to look just a little too deep. Sarah sat at her desk, the open file in front of her revealing more connections than anyone was comfortable admitting. Brent hadn't just kept secrets, he'd engineered outcomes. He'd filed anonymous tips under fake names. He'd rerouted evidence. In at least 3 closed robbery cases, his fingerprints had never been recorded at the scenes, but his handwriting appeared on notes inside patrol logs and incident summaries. Small things, but over time, they painted a picture no one could ignore. Luke was finally strong enough to testify. When she visited his hospital room again, he looked her in the eye and said, "I knew something smelled off. It wasn't just instinct. It was the way people moved around him, like they knew he was always watching." Sarah nodded. "We have the files, the safe, the body cam. It's airtight now." "But it won't bring closure," Luke replied. "Not to the people he manipulated or to the department." He was right. Justice might be served, but the wound Brent had left was deeper than paperwork.
It touched the soul of every officer who had trusted him, laughed with him, trained beside him. He had betrayed a family. But the story didn't end with Brent's arrest. When Travis Lorne, the long-missing getaway driver, caught wind of the news from a small motel in Michigan, he knew his time was up. A local PD arrested him without incident. In exchange for leniency, he spilled everything, confirming Brent's role in the original robbery, the threats made to keep Travis quiet, and the fake identities Brent had helped him set up across 3 states. With that confession, the truth about the warehouse case finally came full circle. Officer Peterson, who'd taken a bullet during that robbery, now knew the real reason he was left bleeding in the dark while help took too long to arrive. Brent had delayed the call-out on purpose. The department went into full audit. Every case Brent had touched was reviewed. Old evidence was re-examined. Some cases were reopened. Others were reclassified. It was exhausting, humiliating work, but necessary. Sarah refused to let the infection spread further. And through it all, there were 2 names that kept coming up in every briefing, in every casual hallway conversation: Emma and Ellie Clark. What those 2 little girls had done, choosing to stay with a dying man instead of running for safety, became a symbol, not just of courage, but of purity, of what the badge was supposed to mean. In a world where betrayal could wear a uniform, those 6-year-olds had reminded everyone what real loyalty looked like. The mayor invited them to a private recognition ceremony. The police chief, tears in his eyes, handed them each a silver medal engraved with the words, "For courage beyond measure." Coda sat proudly beside them, tail thumping the floor as officers applauded. Luke watched from a chair near the front, bandages still visible beneath his shirt, a quiet smile on his face. It was the first time he had truly exhaled since that day in the forest. But it wasn't just a medal that the girls received. Officer Luke Donovan had requested something special, something from his own heart. At the end of the ceremony, he took the microphone. "I don't remember much about the minutes after I was hit. I remember pain, I remember Coda's bark, but mostly I remember 2 tiny hands holding mine. I remember a voice telling me, 'Stay with us.' I don't know which of you said it, maybe both, but that voice kept me awake." He paused, his eyes misting. "You saved me, and not just with your courage, you saved me with your kindness. In a world that can be cruel and ugly, you brought light, and I want to thank you the only way I know how." He turned to an officer at the back who stepped forward holding a large framed certificate. "This is an honorary title, the first of its kind in Pine Brook. You are now junior officers of the Pine Brook Police Department." The crowd erupted in applause. The girls looked stunned. Their parents wept quietly in the audience. And then Coda stood up, trotted forward, and gently rested his head against Ellie's knee. The moment was captured in dozens of photos, later spread across the internet, newspapers, and news channels. It wasn't just a local story anymore. It was a story of how even the smallest voices can echo in the darkest woods, of how 2 children and a dog did what a seasoned force had failed to do: find the truth and save a life. But still, Sarah couldn't shake one last question. How many others like Brent were still hiding behind good manners and clean uniforms? She walked back to the station after the ceremony and stood alone in the evidence room, the scent of old paper and metal lingering in the air. She thought of Luke, of the warehouse, of Brent's cold stare when the handcuffs clicked shut, and she made herself a silent promise. Never again. No more shadows, no more secrets. Because justice wasn't just about catching the guilty, it was about protecting the brave, even the ones who stood just 3 feet tall and wore sparkly shoes.
The still frame from the body cam hovered on the screen in the dim room of the tech lab. The silhouette, the build, even the gait, all unmistakably pointed to Officer Brent Callahan. James leaned forward, his voice low and tight. "He's one of ours." Sarah didn't speak right away. She stared at the image, her jaw clenched. Callahan had been with the department for nearly 9 years. Solid record, no red flags. Friendly, well-liked. He even helped run the annual charity drives. But something about him had always struck Sarah as too polished, too curated, like a mask worn just tight enough to never slip. "Where is he now?" she asked. "At home. Scheduled off shift for the next 2 days," James replied. "Keep him there. Don't confront him. Not yet." They needed more than a blurry body cam image and a suspicion rooted in instinct. If Brent really was the man who attacked Luke, it meant there was a rot within our department, and any wrong move could make it vanish before they uncovered the truth. Sarah returned to Luke's hospital room that evening. He looked stronger. His voice had steadied. She told him about the footage, about the jawline, the stance, the name. Luke didn't look surprised. I thought it might be him, the way he always hovered when I brought up old cases, the way he knew things he shouldn't. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wasn't sure. And Brent's good at hiding. He's careful. If I had accused him without proof, he'd have buried it. I needed to catch him off guard. That's why I went alone. Sarah leaned back. You could have died. I know, but if I hadn't gone, we wouldn't have that footage. We wouldn't have Coda or those girls. And Emma Ellie, they stayed with me in the cold when they could have run. They're the reason I'm still breathing. And they were the reason Sarah pushed harder. The next morning, she quietly pulled Brent's patrol logs, work history, even his financials. Something didn't add up. Despite his modest salary, he'd made several large cash purchases over the past few years. A new truck, a cabin in the woods, a second boat registered under his cousin's name. All of it just under the radar. Legal, but suspicious. More than that, Brent had been assigned to the warehouse robbery scene all those years ago. He'd been a junior officer then, supposedly only on crowd control. But there was no documentation of what he actually did during the call. No body cam, no statements, nothing. James cross-referenced the personnel files. Guess who trained Travis Lorne, the driver who flipped on the other robbers? Don't say it, Sarah muttered. Brent Callahan. They had motive, they had opportunity, they had a pattern, but they needed something that couldn't be dismissed. So Sarah made a choice. She paid Brent a visit. His home was neat, almost unnervingly so. A perfectly trimmed lawn, wind chimes on the porch, a flag fluttering gently beside the door. He opened it with a smile. "Lieutenant Miles," he said cheerfully. "Didn't expect company today. Mind if I come in?" He hesitated only slightly. Of course. The house smelled of coffee and leather. A football game played softly on the TV set. Family photos lined the walls. It was a picture-perfect home, but Sarah noticed how his eyes kept flicking to the hallway as if checking for something or someone. "We recovered a body cam," she began. "From the woods. Luke's attacker was caught on it, partially, enough to raise questions." His brow furrowed. She continued, "From the woods. Luke's attacker was caught on it, partially, enough to raise questions." His voice stayed even. Questions like what? Like how an off-duty cop ended up ambushed in the woods following a tip that may have been sent by someone in our own department. He gave a small laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sounds like a conspiracy theory. Sarah didn't smile. Maybe, or maybe it's a mistake, which is why we'll be running voice analysis and gate matching against our personnel files. Something changed in his pasture then. Just the smallest shift, the kind you'd miss if you weren't watching for it. "I'm sure you'll find whatever you're looking for." "I intend to." As she left the house, her heart pounded. She had pushed just enough. Brent was on alert now, but he didn't know exactly what they had, which meant he might make a mistake. And he did. That night, a motion camera placed at the back entrance of the evidence locker caught a shadowy figure entering with a duplicate keycard. The intruder pried open the temporary storage where the recovered body cam had been kept before being moved to the lab. What he didn't know was that the real footage had already been copied and secured elsewhere. Brent Callahan had just buried himself. At 4 a.m., he was arrested at his home. He didn't resist, didn't speak, didn't ask for a lawyer. He just sat there, hands folded, staring at the wall like someone who knew the game was over. But what stunned the entire department wasn't just his guilt, it was what came after. During a search of his cabin upstate, investigators found a safe hidden beneath floorboards. Inside were old files, marked with names, locations, case numbers, some dating back more than a decade. Records of past heists, blackmail letters, surveillance photos, and tucked in the very back a photo of a younger Brent Callahan standing beside Travis Lorne, smiling, arms around each other like brothers. They had been partners long before the robbery ever happened, and Brent had used his badge to keep them both out of reach. Until now.
As paramedics loaded Sergeant Donovan into the ambulance, Coda refused to leave his side. The dog's loyalty, already known within the department, was now legendary. But inside the chaos of sirens and flashing lights, one thought echoed through Lieutenant Sarah Miles's mind. How did Luke end up there, bleeding out in the woods with no radio, no backup, and no indication of a call? Back at the station, the chief gathered the task force. Sarah stood at the front, reviewing every detail. His GPS was manually turned off. He didn't respond to dispatch since 6:04 a.m. The last recorded ping was from his home Wi-Fi. She paused. He was supposed to be off duty today. That hung in the air like a warning bell. Luke Donovan didn't do unplanned patrols. He was methodical, calculated, a creature of habit. Detective James Holloway opened a file and laid it on the table. 2 days ago, Donovan requested to review archived case files related to a warehouse robbery that occurred 8 years ago. No official reason logged. He didn't sign them out. He just sat there reading for over 2 hours. Sarah frowned. The same robbery where Officer Peterson was shot? I thought that case was closed. It was, sort of. 3 arrests, 2 confessions. But Luke didn't buy it. He mentioned something to me a week ago. Said there was someone on the inside. Did he name anyone? No. He said, and I quote, "I've got to be sure before I speak it out loud." That was Luke. Careful with words, even more careful with trust. It made what happened to him feel less like a random act and more like a trap. Meanwhile, the twins Emma and Ellie were curled up on the living room couch, wrapped in blankets, surrounded by hot chocolate and questions. Their parents, still shaken, had agreed to let Lieutenant Miles visit the girls. She knelt beside the girls, eye level. "You were both incredibly brave. What you did saved a man's life. I want to ask just a few questions, if that's okay." Emma nodded solemnly. Ellie stayed silent but alert. "Did you see anyone else in the forest before you found Sergeant Donovan?" "No," Emma said, "but Daisy was growling. She never growls unless someone's close." Lieutenant Miles looked up. "Close as in following you?" "Maybe," Ellie whispered. "It felt like we weren't alone, like someone was behind us, but when we turned around, there was no one." That was enough for Miles to dispatch a second team to comb through the trail area and to start reviewing all security cameras leading into the forest zone. The strange thing was, Luke's own dash cam footage was missing. His cruiser, found later that night, was abandoned near an old ranger access road, locked with no sign of forced entry. His body cam had been ripped off, its strap torn clean. The pieces weren't adding up. Luke didn't just disappear. Someone went through a lot of effort to erase where he'd been. The next day, Luke regained consciousness. He was weak, but alive. Sarah was the first to visit him in the hospital, notebook in hand. His face was pale, stitched above the temple, oxygen tube gently hissing beside him. But when he saw her, his hand twitched, a signal he was ready. "What happened out there, Luke?" His voice cracked as he spoke. "I followed a lead, a bad one." "What kind of lead?" "Anonymous letter. Said I missed something in the Peterson case. Said the real man behind the robbery was still walking free. And close." "Close? You mean in the department?" He didn't answer. His eyes drifted toward the window. "Luke, I need more." "I got to the woods. Heard rustling. Coda bolted. Then something hit me. Metal pipe, I think. They didn't want to kill me, just warn me." Sarah leaned in. "Did you see their face?" "No, just boots. Heavy ones. Military style. Black laces. And a voice. Deep. They said, 'Stay out of it, Donovan. Last warning.'" "Male?" Luke nodded slowly. "And familiar." Back at the station, James Holloway had pulled up the warehouse case from 8 years ago. One detail caught his eye. Of the 3 men arrested, only 2 were convicted. The third, a man named Travis Lauren, had flipped early and claimed to be just the driver. He vanished 2 years after his release. No known address. But his last listed employer? A private security firm run by former officers. Sarah reviewed the list. Her heart skipped. "Captain Reed used to run this firm," she said out loud. James looked up. "You think Reed's involved?" "I think he knows more than he's telling." Captain Reed had been with the Pine Brook PD for 30 years, retired with full honors. But something in his past always made Sarah uneasy. The way he dodged questions, the quiet meetings, the files that mysteriously vanished under his watch. Later that afternoon, Coda, now calm but restless, led detectives back to the same spot where he had found his partner. This time, they found something buried under a patch of disturbed leaves. A body cam, cracked but recoverable, its internal memory surprisingly intact. They rushed it to tech. The footage was grainy. The timestamp matched Luke's disappearance. For a moment, it was just forest noise, then a shadow. A man in dark clothes, the glint of a metal pipe. The blow. Luke's body slumped. The attacker leaned in, and just before the video cut out, a single word escaped the attacker's mouth, caught in a distorted whisper. Enough. James froze the frame, enhanced that image. The face was turned, but the outline of the jaw, the hairline, the build, it was enough to narrow it down. And what came next shook the entire room. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone still walking the halls of the station.
Bạn sẽ không bao giờ quên được hình ảnh này. Giữa những luống chè xanh mướt đang đón nắng ban mai, 10 cô gái mặc áo dài trắng tinh khôi nằm bất động, đầu chụm vào nhau, thân thể xếp thành một vòng tròn hoàn hảo, trông chẳng khác gì một bông hoa trắng khổng lồ nở giữa đồi chè. Không có tiếng kêu la, không có dấu hiệu giằng co hay hỗn loạn, chỉ có sự tĩnh lặng lạnh lẽo bao trùm. Cả vườn chè như bị đóng băng trong khoảnh khắc kinh hoàng đó. Người dân xã Tân Lập sáng hôm ấy chưa từng nghĩ mình sẽ chứng kiến một hiện trường kỳ dị đến vậy. Ban đầu, ai cũng tưởng đó là một buổi chụp ảnh nghệ thuật. Áo dài trắng, gương mặt trẻ trung, cách xếp hình tinh tế, tất cả quá giống một tác phẩm được dàn dựng. Nhưng khi một người tiến lại gần và nhận ra ánh mắt vô hồn, làn da lạnh ngắt và hơi thở đã tắt lịm, mọi thứ biến thành cơn ác mộng. Tiếng hô hoán vang lên, kéo cả làng chạy tới. Chỉ ít phút sau, tiếng còi hú của xe công an xé tan không gian tĩnh mịch. Cả khu vực bị phong tỏa, lực lượng cảnh sát điều tra, pháp y, kỹ thuật hình sự lập tức có mặt. Nhưng điều khiến ai cũng bàng hoàng hơn cả là hiện trường gần như nguyên vẹn. Không có dấu chân lạ, không có vật lạ vương vãi, không một cành chè bị gãy. Như thể 10 cô gái ấy tự nguyện nằm xuống đúng vị trí, rồi cùng nhau chút hơi thở cuối cùng. Đại úy Phan Minh, người trực tiếp chỉ huy tổ điều tra, đã tham gia hàng trăm vụ án trong suốt 15 năm công tác, nhưng chưa bao giờ đối diện một cảnh tượng phi lý đến vậy. Ông đứng giữa vòng tròn, ánh mắt đảo khắp, tìm kiếm manh mối dù nhỏ nhất. Trên gương mặt các nạn nhân không hề có vết bầm hay thương tích, quần áo vẫn nguyên vẹn, tóc tai gọn làng. Chỉ có đôi môi họ hơi tím tái và ngón tay cái bên bàn tay phải đều bị co quắp một cách bất thường. Đây là vụ án tập thể và có thể liên quan đến chất độc, ông thầm nghĩ. Nhưng nếu là đầu độc, hung thủ đã làm cách nào để 10 người cùng lúc, cùng nơi và cùng tư thế như thế này? Khi danh tính các nạn nhân được xác minh, cả thị trấn nhỏ rúng động. Tất cả đều là học sinh lớp 12 của trường THTT Hòa Bình, tuổi chỉ từ 17 đến 18. Các em đều là thành viên đội văn nghệ của trường, nổi tiếng ngoan ngoãn, học giỏi và chuẩn bị cho kỳ thi tốt nghiệp. Gia đình của từng em đều được mời đến hiện trường để nhận dạng. Tiếng khóc xé lòng vang lên khắp sườn đồi, át cả tiếng gió xào xạc qua tán chè. Trong khi đó, công an tiến hành chụp ảnh, đo đạc, lấy mẫu hiện trường. Một chi tiết lạ được phát hiện, dưới mỗi đầu nạn nhân là một bông hoa trà trắng, tươi nguyên như vừa được ai đó đặt vào đúng vị trí. Những bông hoa ấy không thuộc loại chè trong đồi, mà là loài hoa được trồng ở sân trường Hòa Bình. Điều này lập tức khiến đội điều tra nghiêng về giả thuyết hung thủ quen biết các em và muốn gửi một thông điệp nào đó. Đêm đó, cả tổ điều tra gần như thức trắng tại trụ sở công an huyện. Họ rà soát từng mối quan hệ, từng hoạt động gần đây của 10 nữ sinh, bảng tên, hồ sơ học sinh, thời gian biểu, tất cả được xếp lên bàn. Một thông tin đáng chú ý xuất hiện. Tối hôm trước vụ án, cả 10 em cùng tham gia một buổi tập văn nghệ tại trường, chuẩn bị cho lễ bế giảng. Buổi tập kết thúc lúc hơn 8 giờ tối, và một nhóm bạn cho biết đã thấy họ cùng nhau rời trường. Nhưng không ai biết tại sao, sáng hôm sau, họ lại xuất hiện, và chết, ở đồi chè cách trường gần 4 km. Đại úy Minh quyết định bắt đầu từ hiện trường. Sáng hôm sau, ông cùng 2 điều tra viên quay lại đồi chè. Họ dùng máy quét dỡ vết, soi kỹ từng gốc chè, từng mảng đất. Kết quả, hoàn toàn sạch, không có dấu giày, không có bánh xe, không vết kéo lê. Không thể nào, một điều tra viên lẩm bẩm, làm sao đưa 10 người tới đây mà không để lại dấu. Trong khi cả đội còn đang bối rối, một người dân địa phương rụt rè đến gặp. Ông ta kể, vào khoảng 4 giờ sáng hôm đó, khi đang gùi chè xuống chợ, ông thấy có ánh đèn nhấp nháy ở đồi chè, nhưng nghĩ là người quay phim hay chụp ảnh nên không để ý. Chỉ vài giờ sau, hiện trường kinh hoàng bị phát hiện. Câu nói của ông khiến đại úy Minh bận tâm. Ánh đèn ở đồi chè vào lúc gần sáng, đó có thể là thời điểm hung thủ sắp rời đi. Nhưng ánh đèn ấy từ đâu ra? Xe, đèn pin hay một thiết bị gì khác? Ông yêu cầu điều tra viên đi rà soát tất cả camera quanh khu vực, dù biết vùng đồi núi này rất ít thiết bị ghi hình. 3 ngày trôi qua, vụ án vẫn bế tắc. Mọi giả thuyết đưa ra đều bị loại bỏ. Các nạn nhân không có kẻ thù, không dính đến tệ nạn, không mâu thuẫn cá nhân. Tất cả như biến mất vài giờ trong đêm, rồi xuất hiện tại đồi chè với tư thế sắp đặt hoàn hảo. Thế nhưng, chính khi mọi thứ tưởng chừng rơi vào ngõ cụt, một manh mối bất ngờ xuất hiện.